In this video, we will be looking at constructing the roof for the tower. And in our cutting guide on page 2, it lists the pieces that we need. Again, we're looking at the tower section, and at the bottom of the tower section, it talks about the roof base, this large square. Then there's 8 of the shorter height trapezoids, and it explains what the height, the length of the top and the bottom is for both those trapezoids and the part 2 trapezoids, which are a little taller, and then part 3 are some triangles that go on the top. And then also listed on there are roof inner supports. I haven't cut mine yet. I want to check the measurements before I cut it into the pieces that we'll need, but eventually there'll be 8 of those as well. At least that's what I'm thinking at this point. So to get started, on the roof base it says cut an octagon with 2 1/4 inch sides, and so we construct this just like we did the top and bottom of the tower itself. We put our centering ruler down on a side, make sure that 0 is in the center, and then since we want a 2 1/4 inch side, we'll measure out 1 1/8 inch each direction from 0, and that'll give us a 2 1/4 inch side. Do that on all 4 sides, join the tick marks, and cut off the corners, and that's what I've already done here. So if you've measured and cut correctly, then these diagonals that you cut should also measure 2 1/4 inches. The other prep step for this base is that I'm going to cut a 2-inch circle in the middle using, this is a steel rule magnetic die that cuts a 2-inch circle. This one is by Tim Holtz, and so I'll do that here in a minute and cut that circle. The other prep before we get started is to draw and make templates for the pattern paper that we will eventually use to cover the tower. So I've made a template for roof part 1, roof part 2, and roof part 3 just by tracing them out on a piece of paper. So to get started, what we want to do is to do some joining. And what we'll do is first we'll join all of our section 1s, and they'll be end to end like this, just butt joints. Use a cardstock joining strip in between, trim off any excess, and just to start with, just don't join the 2 ends, just put 8 in a row. And we'll do that for all of our part 1s here, then all of our part 2s, and our triangles. So I'll be back when I've got that accomplished. So I think you can see here that I've joined all of the sections for each part of the tower roof. Now here for part 1, these are the short trapezoids. What I've also done is added some joining strips, and on the longer edges I've added those to the inside of the ring, and on the shorter side I've added them to the outside of the ring. So you can see here we're looking at the inside of the ring, and I can see the score tape backing on the short sides, and if I flip this over on the outside you can see the score tape backing there. So on part 1, on the long side, the joining strips go on the inside, and on the short side they go on the outside. Now here on part 2, what I've done is add the joining strips only on the outside of the short side. You can see there's nothing down on this long edge. That's because they're already on part 1. And then on the triangles, all I've done is put them together. So, to put this together, we're going to start with part 1, and the short side of part 1 is going to go onto the roof base. Now the roof base gets inset, and you can dry fit this to start with. It gets inset. That's why we put those tabs on the outside of the section. So this is how it's going to go together. So I'm going to do that first. And I also do have a little joining tab here on the end. I'm just going to work my way around. Just going lightly at first. And I think I can take off all of these backings. And just kind of keep on going around, sticking the corners in, keeping it flat on my work surface, so that hopefully when we get around here to this end, this joining strip that I have right here will go on the inside. Kind of check and see how that all is, and then we'll give that a good burnish. I'm just supporting it with my hand underneath and burnishing it from the outside as well. Okay. So now we're ready to put section 2 on, and I think for this one it would probably be best to just go ahead and make this into a ring to begin with, and I'll do that just by butting those two ends together and giving that a burnish as well. And then we'll go ahead and remove these backings. Kind of see that these are folded down kind of a little bit so they don't prematurely engage. And then we'll just pick one side here and kind of line it up and just lightly engage that score tape. And then I like to kind of skip a couple sections and see if I can get the corners to meet of the next section. Skip a couple sections, get those corners to meet. Skip a couple sections. And now we're back at the beginning and we can get those other sections in. Now the only way to burnish this is really with your fingers kind of running along the inside there. Okay, so now we've got this structure. Now originally I had thought that maybe we would need some support pieces on the inside, but this is very sturdy, so I don't think we need to do that. So we're just going to add the triangle part, and again we're going to make this into a circle, and we kind of need to trim this off up here at the top. You should be able to just flatten this down and kind of butt this up because it's a regular kind of solid shape, and then reach in as best as possible with the tip of your bone folder and get that burnished down. And then this is going to fit here, and all of these tabs will come, and you'll be able to reach in through the hole in the bottom here and support each one of these. That was the reason for making that hole, so that as you go to join this on, you'll be able to reach in. You can see my fingers inside here and join that on. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll be back. So now I have the tower roof all constructed, and I want to do some finishing of these edges here because it would be difficult to cover this roof piece in continuous pieces of paper. So I think we'll use our templates. This is what I'm at least thinking at this point, is using the templates to cover in sections. So I don't want to see these cracks. Now if these cracks don't bother you, you can skip this step. So what I'm going to do, and you can see that some of them have already been finished just during the construction process, because whenever we put a joining strip on the outside, it in effect finished that joint. And down here at the bottom, and here with the triangles to part 2. So I'm going to start by cutting some 2-inch strips that then I cut a 45-degree angle in, and these I'm going to put that point right there at the join between section 1 and 2, and then before I wrap this, which is obviously too long, I'm going to cut that down the middle. See if I can get that where you can see it. Cut that down the middle and wrap one side in. This is a pretty long piece, but I found that if it doesn't matter, that if you have a little length, then it stays a little better. And then I'm just going to trim this one off, just so I don't have a lot of overlap. Hopefully you can see that. I've just cut kind of a diagonal piece off the edge of that, and then I'll wrap that around. And I can reach in through this bottom hole and of course burnish all those. So once I've done that for all of 8 of those joins, then I'm going to come back and see what the distance is in between this section, part 1 and part 2, and put a strip there. I'm going to cut that at 45-degree angles on the ends too, just to reduce some of that bulk. And then I'm going to proceed upwards. Now I'm still thinking about this section, so I'll complete these 3 pieces and then we'll be back. So I finished covering all of the edges, the little short ones here, the longer horizontal ones, and these on the second trapezoid. So I'm just left with the edges between the triangles. And I was trying to think of a way to reduce bulk up here at the point. And what I've come up with is, this is a 3-inch circle of black cardstock, which I just cut in half. And then I'm going to take some temporary adhesive and line the point, I'm going to bring that point up a little bit past where the chipboard comes, and just line up that edge with one of the panels, and then wrap this around and make some little tick marks where each of the intersections is. And then I can crease up to the point from those intersections once I've got those all marked. And then there'll obviously be a little bit extra here that I can cut off. But that'll allow me to wrap this top part, and then I can just bring in my regular finishing strips, and they can come up to where the bottom of that circle is, and then down to this intersection. So we won't have so much bulk up at the tip. So that's what I'm going to do to finish off the top here. So I have my little section here, and I backed it with some score tape, and now I'm just going to wrap that around the top here. Just kind of go lightly at first, watching that point and watching the score lines. I'm going to trim this back a little bit from where I had. Actually, I think I'll pick up this first one here a little bit if I can. Then trim the last one off a little bit, and then I can put it underneath the first one. Probably trim that first one off a little bit just so the edge isn't right there on the edge. Right, so now I've got a little cap that comes down about 1.5 inches or so, and I don't have any bulk up here at the top. And so now I just will fill in these strips here, and then we'll be ready to think about pattern paper. So now I'm ready to put pattern paper on the roof, and I've got my 3 templates that I drew before we started putting it together. I'm just going to do a little test fit here and see how these templates hold up. And it looks fine at the base, but I think it's a little short because of the way I finished this point up here. I think that it's a little bit short. In fact, I think it's short by a good 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to make a new template that keeps the same base but increases the height 1/4 of an inch, and try that. And then for the part 1 and 2, what I'm thinking about is joining these two together and doing this as one piece of paper so that we wouldn't have a seam. We would just do a score line here. And so I'm checking this out to see how that looks. And I think what would need to be done here, which is not surprising, is that this bottom piece would need to be elongated just a tad. So I'm going to make some templates to do that, and then cut some pattern paper, and I'll be back. So I think a template will work fine for the top part, but for here on the bottom, I've got some variation between my sections. Mostly the width here, not so much the height. And so I've cut a piece, for me it is 2 1/4 plus a 16th, so 2 5/16. And then I scored it at 1 1/2 inches. And then what I'm going to do, I think, is just measure each piece individually. That way I'll have a nice fit. So if I just take the corner here to the corner, and then I can see where to mark it down here on the bottom. And then if I hold on to it here, I can peek up and make a tick mark here where I need to cut it. And then up here at the top, I'll just measure for my I'll center a 1 1/2 right in the middle. So that's going to be my plan for putting these pieces on. I'm going to put these pieces on first and then put the top pieces on. So this is the way I'm working around the roof here. You can see I've got one section on. I've cut the bottom and the top for the next section. And so I'll go ahead and put this bottom piece on. And then I'm trying to kind of meet this edge here and not have too much of a black reveal. I'm good with having black in between the sections, that's fine. But that's how I'm going to try to proceed around the roof here. So I have my tower roof all covered with pattern paper. And the last thing that I want to do is to put a piece of black cardstock across this bottom. And I used my template that we made, and I cut a piece of black cardstock out. And I did need to trim it a little bit so I could hold it back from the edges slightly. And then I put my abundant score tape on here because half of this roof is going to get joined to the tower, and we want to make sure that we get very good coverage and that the paper is well adhered to the base. So I'll do that, and then we'll just set the tower roof aside again.